The courtroom was cloaked in a silence so heavy it felt as though the air itself had thickened. Every creak of the wooden benches, every quiet breath seemed magnified, echoing through the vast room like thunderclaps. The weight of expectation pressed on everyone present. No one moved. No one whispered. All eyes were fixed on the small figure standing alone in the witness box. 7-year-old Aiden Parker gripped the polished wooden rail with trembling hands. His knuckles were pale, his small chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths. His large brown eyes darted nervously around the room, searching for something, anything familiar or safe. But there was nothing familiar here, nothing safe. The judge, a woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked hair, tied back in a severe bun, leaned forward slightly. Her voice, though gentle, was laced with quiet authority. "Aiden," Judge Harper said, her gaze softening as it met the boy's. "Do you understand why you're here today?" Aiden nodded. His lower lip quivered, and he swallowed hard before answering. "Yes, ma'am," he whispered, his voice almost lost in the cavernous room. And then, without prompting, he raised his small hand and pointed across the courtroom. His tiny finger leveled directly at a man sitting at the front of the gallery, dressed in his crisp police uniform. Officer Nathan Callahan. The color drained from Callahan's face. His jaw clenched tight, his knuckles gripping the edge of his seat until they turned white. Yet Aiden's hand did not waver. He stood there, his arms straight and steady despite the tremble in his fingers. "It's him," Aiden whispered, barely loud enough to be heard. "He's the one who hurt my mom." For a moment, there was nothing but stunned silence. Then gasps erupted like a wave crashing through the room. The sudden scraping of a chair echoed as Officer Callahan shot to his feet, his face hardening into a mask of fury and fear. "Order!" Judge Harper barked, bringing her gavel down with a sharp crack. But the damage was already done. The gallery was alive now, a storm of murmurs and disbelief swirling among the spectators. Because in that moment, something fundamental had shifted. The case had always seemed straightforward. A tragedy, yes, but not an unusual one. A single mother found dead after a supposed accident. An unfortunate loss for her young son. But now, this quiet, timid boy had pointed an accusing finger at one of their own. And everything changed. The night that changed everything. Aiden Parker wasn't supposed to be here. He was just a kid. A shy, sweet boy who loved dinosaurs, who spent his afternoons building castles out of cardboard boxes in his grandmother's backyard. His world had been small. His mom, Rachel Parker. His dog, Toby. The little house with peeling paint on Sycamore Lane. But everything changed that night. His mom hadn't come home. Aiden remembered sitting at the window for hours, his forehead pressed against the cool glass, watching the streetlights flicker as night deepened. His heart had raced with hope when a pair of headlights finally appeared at the corner. But it wasn't his mom's old car. It was a black and white police cruiser. And stepping out was Officer Callahan, the same officer who had always waved at Aiden on his patrols through the neighborhood. But that night, there was no wave. No smile. Just a cold, grim expression. "There's been an accident," Callahan had said, his voice flat, rehearsed. "Your mom's gone." Aiden had stared at him, confusion swirling with rising panic. Something about the way Callahan said it. Too calm, too practiced. And then he saw it. Blood. A faint smear of red, nearly invisible, staining the cuff of Callahan's uniform. And Aiden remembered something his mom had told him just days earlier. Her voice hushed, her eyes filled with fear she couldn't hide. "If anything ever happens to me, Aiden," she had whispered, "don't trust anyone. Not even the police." The drawing that changed everything. For days after the funeral, Aiden had barely spoken. He had retreated into his small world, clutching his favorite toy dinosaur, as if it could somehow bring his mom back. But then his teacher noticed something. During art class, while the other children drew superheroes and rainbows, Aiden's drawings were dark. Scribbled images of a man in a police uniform, a woman lying still on the ground, a car with headlights that glowed like angry eyes. When the teacher gently asked about the picture, Aiden burst into tears. "That's him," he sobbed. "That's Officer Callahan. He hurt my mom. He made her go away." The school reported it. And suddenly, Aiden's world changed again. Lawyers, detectives, social workers, courtrooms. The police department dismissed Aiden's words as the confused ramblings of a grieving child. But his grandmother, Margaret Parker, wasn't so sure. She knew her daughter, and she knew something was wrong. She found a defense attorney named Lucas Granger. He was relentless, known for taking on impossible cases. And he believed Aiden. And so the trial began. The trial. The prosecution argued that Aiden was simply traumatized, lashing out in confusion and pain. They painted Officer Callahan as a dedicated cop with an unblemished record. But Granger had a different theory. Corruption. A cover-up. A secret that would tear the town of Brookhaven apart. Aiden took the stand on the second day. His voice was shaky, his small hands trembling. But as he spoke, his words painted a picture more vivid than anyone could have imagined. He described that night in detail. How he had waited. How Callahan had come, telling him lies. And then he revealed something no one expected. "I have something," Aiden said quietly. He reached into the pocket of his jeans and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. It was a receipt from a gas station, dated the night his mom had died. "My mom gave this to me," Aiden explained. "She said if anything happened to her, I should give it to someone who could help." On the back of the receipt was a license plate number. It matched Callahan's personal vehicle. And everything exploded. The confession. The courtroom became a battleground. The police department closed ranks, defending Callahan. They tried to discredit Aiden, said he was confused, that he was lying. But Granger pushed back. He found surveillance footage from that gas station. It showed Rachel Parker and Callahan arguing. Her face pale, her hands shaking as she clutched a folder close to her chest. And then, Callahan followed her out of frame. On the final day of the trial, Callahan took the stand. "I didn't hurt your mom," he said, looking directly at Aiden. "I tried to save her. Sometimes bad things happen. We can't explain them." For a moment, Aiden wavered. Doubt crept in, but then he remembered. Don't trust anyone. And he didn't. "I'm not afraid of you," Aiden said. "You hurt my mom, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." The defense attorney turned to Callahan. "Officer Callahan," Granger said quietly, "why did you kill Rachel Parker?" Callahan's mask cracked. "She was going to ruin me," he spat. "She found out. About the money. The deals. She was going to go public. I couldn't let that happen. I didn't have a choice." Gasps rippled through the room. "You killed her to protect yourself," Granger pressed. Callahan's face twisted in rage and despair. "She wouldn't stop," he whispered. "She wouldn't just let it go." Justice served. The jury deliberated for hours. When they returned, the foreman's voice was clear. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Officer Nathan Callahan, guilty of obstruction of justice and manslaughter in the death of Rachel Parker." Aiden felt his grandmother's arm wrap around his shoulders. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Callahan's face was pale. Judge Harper's voice was steady. "Officer Callahan, you have betrayed the trust placed in you by this community. You are hereby sentenced to 15 years in prison with no possibility of parole." The gavel came down. Aiden stood taller. He had spoken the truth. And somewhere, he knew his mom was proud. If this story moved you, hit that like button and leave a comment down below. Share your thoughts, your feelings, and maybe your own story of courage and justice. And if you want to hear more stories where truth triumphs over lies, check out the playlist on your screen right now. Because real change, it starts with you. One brave choice at a time.